having a community that is doing this, that is walking alongside you, I know I would not be as involved as I am, or even keep this as much a priority as I do, if I didn't have people around me who saw it in the same light.
All right, Elyssa Currey, how you doing? Thanks so much for joining the show. How are you?
I'm doing well, Cam. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I am not going to try to embarrass you too much on this show. I have heard an awful lot. I don't think that we've ever met. I apologize if we have met. I probably should have clarified that before we hit the record button. I don't think that we've ever met, but I've heard a million good things about you. So I'm really excited to dive into a little bit of your backstory as to how you got plugged in with CCBR and doing all the pro-life outreach that you've been a part of. Because am I correct in thinking that you're tied into not only the Niagara Against Abortion group, but also Toronto Against Abortion and a lot of the other work that's happening in Southwest Ontario? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so I started in Niagara. I'm not as involved there anymore. Still on the chat, but mostly working out of Toronto area, GTA, Hamilton, Peel region.
Gotcha. Sounds good. And there's a ton of stuff happening out of there. I'm sure that I know that we have a lot of listeners out of there. Any listeners that are not actively involved in that area, please do reach out. Absolutely. And yet for many, I'm sure that they look at people such as yourself, others that are super actively involved in the pro-life movement. And I guess I get asked a lot of, how did I get involved? And was this kind of like you punch a button and you go from 0 to 60, or is this a gradual rise and gradual increase in involvement? I'm curious, from your journey, has it been a gradual increase in involvement, or when you first got plugged in, was it kind of pedal to the metal and just taken as many opportunities as you possibly could? What was your kind of entry story like?
Yeah, more the latter, more 0 to 60. So abortion was like an issue that I was aware of even as a kid, and it weighed on my heart. But it was very much like, it was such a big issue. Like, I'm just one person. What can I do about it? And so I wasn't active in the movement until about the summer of 2019. I went to CCBR's summer crash course. So it was 3 days long. I'd never done pro-life outreach really, but was equipped there with a lot of the tools to realize one person can make such a difference. And from there was became involved in Niagara Against Abortion and just any other community group that was going out and doing outreach. Like, I was there. So very full steam ahead. Like, when I kind of realized this is what I can do, that was more my journey and entrance into it.
That makes a ton of sense, and that's really cool to hear. And I don't know if you were able to join for any of the summer 2023's Faces of Abortion tour presentations, but obviously that was a major theme that we focused on, at least down west here. I was one of the main speakers on the Western tour, and we talked a lot about the question of what would be weirder, to be confronted with the reality of abortion, particularly the abortion victims, and to do nothing, or to be confronted with this reality and the very real victims who desperately need us, and to massively alter our lives. And I wonder, as you got very, very involved, if you had any questions ever from friends or family of like, whew, Elyssa, just maybe cool off a little bit and pace yourself or anything like that. Like, was anyone expressing, even in a kind of humorous capacity, of like, whoa, you are really, really getting involved here? And if so, what was kind of your response in helping them appreciate why a very involved kind of approach was absolutely appropriate when addressing the issue of abortion?
I would say most of my family and the people close to me were quite supportive. When I came back from the crash course, it was almost a kind of feeling of culture shock. Like, you're back in the same place, but everything is different. And so it was hard for me to communicate that to the people who hadn't been there, hadn't kind of um, seen or been impacted in the same way that I had. And so I would say people would talk to me in terms of like, hey, like you need to not burn yourself out and like pace yourself, but in a good way. Um, and finding people that kind of also got it, like understood, like this is an emergency and we need to be like all hands on deck. We need to be addressing this with as much priority as we can in our lives. I found that not everyone understood that in the same way. Just like, oh, like that's great, you found something you're passionate about, good for you. Like, and it's less of like this is an emergency for everybody to be involved in. So yeah, it was a little bit odd in that I feel like I understand something that you don't see this as an emergency, um, and kind of having to figure out how do I communicate that to people um, without alienating them, I guess, in my zeal.
Yeah. I think you're bang on there. And I know that's something that many of our interns and intern alumni have experienced as well. And back in the olden days when I was running internships, I would often call it the Narnia effect of how you kind of
Yeah.
enter into a whole different world with people that have the same passions and same drive to end, as you put it, this emergency that we're faced with in Canada and around the world. And how, yeah, when you kind of step out of the wardrobe and step out of Narnia, you're kind of confronted with very good, very well-meaning people, friends, family members, loved ones who have a heart for preborn children, but it's just not quite the same. And I'm curious, as you kind of explained that, and I think that you alluded to it very well there, of the value that community can have in that and being plugged in with the greater CCBR community and others, maybe they've done internships in the past, maybe they haven't, but people who have a like-minded approach to this emergency. What would you say would be the value of connecting with people that are like-minded like that, and really being able to not only participate in activism with them and do as much activism as you can, but also process that activism? That when you go through a tough choice, Jane, or a tough activism event in for whatever reason, and maybe you talk to a friend or family member that doesn't have the same plug in, and they say, oh, well, what you need to do is take a step back and really evaluate things and this and that. What would you say is the value of having like-minded people as a part of a team that are kind of shoulder to shoulder with you in this fight?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I remember trying to communicate that to some people who had not been involved in that community. And then the first time that I actually just went and called my cousin who had been involved for much longer than and I didn't have to explain it to her. She just understood that. And that was very helpful in, I guess, feeling not like you're crazy or alienated in this fight. You referenced like the Faces of Abortion tour, and I think one of the themes of that talk was feeling like you're insane, like you and nobody else is doing this. So having a community that is doing this, that is walking alongside you, I know I would not be as involved as I am, or even keep this as much a priority as I do if I didn't have people around me who saw it in the same light. Um, yeah, so definitely very valuable to have that community, even just to keep you steadily on the ground, and not kind of losing steam and you just kind of had an emotional reaction and now you're just backing off. But to have people who are committed to it as well, um, keeps me committed for sure.
Gotcha. I know that I'm going off script here a little bit with, I mean, not that I sent you very much to prepare with in the first place, but another question I wanted to ask. So, this past weekend, I was up in Edmonton working with some volunteers, as part of our Edmonton Against Abortion group. And we were talking about doing pro-life presentations to pro-life leaders and whatnot. And the question came up that has come up a million times before as to whether or not the value of abortion victim photography for pro-life audiences. I think that there's more and more people that are really coming on board with the fact that our culture needs to be confronted with the victims of abortion. They need to be confronted with what is being chosen and who that choice is impacting. And yet, I'm sure that you've heard before, and I know that my colleagues and staff have heard countless times of the whether or not pro-lifers themselves need to be confronted with this reality. Don't we already know what abortion is? Don't we already
Mm.
know how bad abortion is? And I'm curious, from your perspective, as somebody who is as involved as you are and so driven, what would you say to a pro-lifer who said to you of like, I don't really think that I need to be confronted with abortion because I already know how bad abortion is. I already know that I'm pro-life. What goes through your mind in that?
Well, I would say I didn't when
Yeah.
I attended the crash course, and it was a lot seeing the injustice that really
Mm.
impacted me. I think the proof is in like what you're doing about it. Like if you already think you know what abortion is, then like if you know what it is, you would be acting on it. Um, and for pro-lifers, I think in certain situations there are pro-life people who don't need to necessarily be encountered by the images all the time. People who have had miscarriages and it's really difficult to look at, or even people who are post-abortive and have processed that, but can find it very difficult to be around the images. In certain instances, I can understand, like, yeah, not maybe every single pro-lifer needs to be encountering these all the time. For the most part, though, I know that seeing the images, seeing the video, seeing the evidence of the injustice is what got me, is what moved me so much during just 3 days in the crash course. And um, that uh, I guess the impact that it made on me made me reshape my life until it was just built into my life. And so like the impact of seeing the images and seeing the video, seeing the injustice, you can't turn a blind eye to it. It doesn't allow you to just walk away as maybe just talking about abortion does. Um, I remember for probably a year after going to the crash course, like abortion was the first thing on my mind, the last thing on my mind. Like it was so visually ingrained in me that it made me take action. And then I didn't always run on that kind of like emotional drive, but after about a year of that, it became such a part of my life. Um, and now like I operate not always because I'm really really impacted by the images. Like there are times that I feel that way, times that I don't. Um, but they served to propel me into the movement. I think that's what they do for a lot of pro-lifers um, who maybe haven't seen them before. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful way of putting it. So thank you for sharing that. And I think that that can resonate with a ton of people, whether in our audience or as we share and get into a wider and wider audience, that this is so important, not only for catalyzing people into the movement, but also sustaining them through. Um, I don't know if you've had days when you'd rather not do activism, that you look for excuses to not do activism. You know, I got enough homework that I could probably skip this choice gene, and I've still done more than anyone else in this group, right? I could probably take a pass on this and really who's going to know kind of thing. And I know that for myself, the images are a vital constant reminder. I mean, not that I have a picture glued to my eyelids or anything like that per se, but to have that regular reminder. I know that even for myself, having worked in the movement for 10 full years before this summer, the Face of Abortion tour had a profound impact on me
Mm-hmm.
because it really challenged me to really consider the relationship that I have with preborn children and the decisions that I make, even as a leader in the pro-life movement. And I think that that probably goes for many people, that whether you've seen a video before, whether you've seen images before, that we're all people who have different things pulling at our time, our attention, our emotions, everything. And you wouldn't be the first person, not you personally, but anyone in the audience wouldn't be the first person who lost some of that vigor because the preborn children again become a little bit more out of sight, out of mind. I mean, I often talk about how we are blessed. We get to stand behind the pictures. We're not often the ones who are looking at them ourselves. We get to stand behind the
Mm-hmm.
pictures. We don't see them in the same way. And so I think it's a really great way of how you framed it, of how important anchoring our considerations around the very real people and not just the statistics, not just the talking points per se. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I got to ask you and I know that there's no right answer or no real wrong answer to this. What is your favorite form of activism? I mean, I'm sure that you've done most, if not all, of our different activism projects, be the banner project or vehicle choice chain or postcarding or door knocking, or I don't know if you've ever joined for an against abortion awareness project giant display, but of all the projects that you've done, what is your favorite?
Yeah, I think a lot of people say this, but I like postcarding when my brain is tired, and I like choice chain when my body is tired. So, um, yeah, it really depends on how I'm feeling. Um, yeah, I think when I don't do choice chain for a while, it can seem intimidating because I don't have that conversational aspect. I've just been handing out postcards for a while, but then getting into it, like I would say that brings the most is one of the most rewarding projects because you have that interaction with a person. Whereas when you drop a postcard, you don't necessarily get to see the result of it. And often at Choice Chain, it's really encouraging because you do see like immediate results and immediate change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a ton of sense. And I love even how the two weave together, right? It breaks my heart, all the people that I see at Choice Chain that walk by and
Mm-hmm.
either they say that they don't have time or they're not willing to take a pamphlet or anything like that. And to know that I can reach them with this important truth via postcarding,
Mm-hmm.
I think the projects dovetail together so well. And I know that door knocking has its pros and cons and whatnot. I also love door knocking as well because it ensures it's so slow and that kind of grates on my soul a little bit, but it's so thorough in knowing that all the people that I miss at Choice Chain, I've got an opportunity to talk to them at their home when they don't have to worry about what their coworker or their classmate is going to say when they
Yeah.
overhear them or
It
see
feels
them
so
talking to us.
relaxed.
It's fantastic. And so that's really cool. And I guess what do you anticipate coming? I know that we don't know exactly what's going to come down the tube in the future, but when you look at 2024, do you have particular pro-life events or goals that you have circled in your day planner or in your calendar kind of thing? Or do you just kind of take it as it comes and you'll be ready and willing whenever the opportunity presents itself?
Yeah, we started Peel Against Abortions. I was kind of focused on Mississauga region, between Toronto and Hamilton. So that started about a year and a half ago, I think. And so I was quite involved with Hamilton, Toronto. But we started Peel, so my main focus is going to be more kind of in building this community group. Um, our leadership team and our activism really prioritizing that, so I might not be quite as spread out in the other community groups. But I think it's going to be exciting to see more regular activism in kind of the region that was missed between those two major cities. So that's kind of my focus, and then just, of course, still taking any opportunity that I can within that region and coordinating volunteers.
Wonderful. Well, I am so appreciative, as are so many others, for your involvement, for all of your dedication. And I'm excited to see everything that you guys are able to accomplish in the Greater Toronto area, Southwest Ontario, but the Peel region in particular, as you mentioned there. So thanks a ton for all the work that you do. Thank you for taking the time to join me on the Pro-Life Guys podcast. And I hope that 2024 is a wonderful year for you and the team out there.
Thank you so much, Cam. Thanks for having me.